Thank you. It's really special to have the opportunity to be here, so I just want to say thank you very much. And I do want to note that it is very special for me to get to be hosted by Senator Boozman here in his home state. And he has been obviously a dedicated public servant, and I think everyone here knows about his tremendous accomplishments on behalf of the state. What you might not know as much about is the fact that he chairs the Malaria Caucus and the Hunger Caucus, and that he fights really hard on issues that maybe have not traditionally been seen as particularly rewarding to spend time on from a political perspective, because he brings such personal passion and commitment to the work. And I've had a chance to see that leadership in action in Washington. And you know, every time people make disparaging comments about Congress or our elected officials, I just think you have an example in Senator Boozman of someone who's very, very special, and when the cameras are off, is fighting very, very hard for some of the world's most vulnerable families, and doing that because he just cares about getting it right. So thank you, Senator. It's a real honor to be here with you. I also have enjoyed getting to know Kathy, who has traveled with us together. I've traveled with them together to some of these places we'll talk about, and I'm so glad that you're here as well. I want to thank Skip Rutherford for having us here and for your leadership. The Clinton School's become an incredibly special place. I just got to meet with a group of students. Are they in the room? Some are in the room, right? Oh, good. There they are in the back there, who are just awesome. And if you don't get a chance, if you get a chance after, please pull them aside and ask them what they're doing, because it's amazing. You'll have a hard time believing that they're students. That you would think they're alums. And I want to recognize Dustin McDaniel, the Attorney General. Thank you for being here, as well as so many other leaders who aren't here today, Stephanie Street and Bruce Lindsay, both of whom have poured their hearts into this work. And finally, Fernando Kutz, who you've heard about, is really one of the special people at USAID. And so we're thrilled that he comes from here, and I suspect likely someday will come back, maybe have the senator's job in the future. And so I just want to be on his good side, basically, at this point. But he's actually been out in the field working on our projects and programs before he even got to USAID, working on things like evaluation. And guess I'll start there. This is Trish Flanagan. Is Trish here today in Sri Lanka? This is a photo of her in Sri Lanka, but it's just emblematic of what I know is the spirit of this institution and the school. That you're a town of scholars and people committed to really being rigorous and focused in making sure when America invests its resources abroad to do good, that it's actually generating that kind of a result. Clinton School students have, like Trish, completed 400 field projects in more than 60 countries, adding up to nearly 130,000 hours of field service. And even more extraordinary than the time is the kinds of things they tackle. Stan Luker, who's working in northern Uganda to create a strategic plan for a school for former child soldiers, is an example of that kind of leader. Stan, are you here? No? He's in Uganda, of course. If you're creating a school for former child soldiers, you should stay in Uganda. And it will soon include Sean O'Keefe, who I met earlier, and Aliyah Sarkar, who are heading off this summer to work with CARE International in Turkey to monitor and evaluate the humanitarian assistance reaching Syrian refugees. And they are here. Can you guys put your hands up? Yeah, there you are. Good. And I just want to say this is really important, because the first and most fundamental thing we have to do is demonstrate with clarity that when we make investments to protect the world's most vulnerable, to end extreme poverty, to prevent child death at large scale, that those investments, those partnerships, those ideas are delivering that result. And I'll talk a little bit about what we've done to help bring that kind of a culture of evaluation and results and business-like rigor to the business of development. But these are powerful examples, and I think this school is going to generate just a whole cadre of folks who can go out and do this work and give confidence and knowledge to the work that is development around the world. Now, in addition, this is a community that has amazing institutions that do work on the issues and in partnership with us. Heifer International, great institution right next door. We had a chance to visit earlier. Thank you. Winrock International, just to name a few. And increasingly, as development investments are frankly outpaced by private investment, it's increasingly critical that great private companies and public companies engage as partners in the mission we have to end hunger and extreme poverty. And so part of the rationale for the visit here is to engage great Arkansas businesses and business leaders who have committed to this fight, and I look forward to learning later today about some of the efforts in Rwanda in particular that many of you have been a part of. Now, I do want to note that Secretary Clinton and President Clinton have made this work their mission, and it was an honor for me to get a chance to serve under Secretary Clinton as Secretary of State, who I think cared more about, worked harder on, and fought harder for development efforts than any prior Secretary of State. And it's because her caring and depth of commitment was just, and continues to be, so extraordinary. The downside of someone who worked for her is that she knew everybody in the field, in country after country, projects and programs from decades of really becoming a development expert herself. So she held us to a high bar of performance. And I'm just kidding, of course. That's a great thing because it helps us all get better and deliver better results. But you know, one of the things we talked a lot about with her and with President Clinton was doing our work in a way that actually speeds the transition from dependence to dignity and self-sufficiency. And this is a photograph of a visit I made with Dr. Jill Biden and Dr. Bill Frist to the world's largest refugee camp 50 miles from the Somali border. In a camp originally built for about 80 to 90,000 people, they were, when we visited, bringing in about 2,500 people a day and already at about 470,000 refugees. I had never previously been in the midst of a famine, but the things you see and are exposed to in that context are the kinds of images that will never leave you. We spoke to women who described a 30, 40, 50-kilometer journey by land on foot through an area where they were impoverished, leaving with children in their arms, attacked by convoys of al-Shabaab terrorist affiliated groups, and just seeking safety, security, food, and a chance for their children to survive. We know from a retrospective review of dozens of surveys that 165,000 children under the age of 5 perished during this famine, and I had a chance to meet some of those children who didn't make it because they didn't have food. And it's really hard to fully understand what that feels like and to communicate what that feels like. But you know, at the time I was proud of our team. Our team took personal risks. They went into what was effectively a war zone. Some of our partners were killed in an effort to serve. And they brought new ways of working. When the food convoys were being attacked and it was clear that the traditional model of food aid was simply not going to save lives, they negotiated partnerships with cell phone companies. And we got Cargill to, which happened to have a big shipment going by, we got them to donate a huge amount of food and leave it at the port with local traders, and then we were able to get vouchers on people's mobile phones to communities in famine-affected areas. And we were tracking food prices in about 60 different markets in Somalia. We could see when food prices are 400% up, that's basically correlated with the famine, and when the prices went down, that meant there was enough food and enough purchase of those food, and people were back on a path of survival. And we could see as soon as these technology-enabled efforts got some real scale, all of a sudden the famine and the child death challenge just plummeted. And I looked at the data recently, and you look at that and you think that was a moment when American partnership, American values, expressed through science, through technology, through a modern way of working, through measuring results, saved hundreds of thousands of children's lives. And it's something that every American, I believe, ought to take deep, deep, deep pride in what was accomplished there. But about a month ago, I returned to Somalia and went to Mogadishu. And today, we're replacing food aid with seeds and farm tools so that farmers can go out of the displaced persons camps in Mogadishu back into 400 agricultural communities throughout the countryside and rebuild their lives with dignity and self-sufficiency. We've replaced piracy on the coastal regions with small-scale fishing markets so that people can have a legal form of making ends meet and building wealth for their families. In Mogadishu, a city once synonymous with the word war, we've installed 600 solar-powered streetlights, and the mayor of Mogadishu told me in person that for the first time in decades, people came out peacefully to celebrate at night, that first night the lights went on. And that's the kind of hopefulness and self-sufficiency that we can transition to. Now, it's going to be very tough. This is a long, fragile context. When I was there, there were acts of violence that, will slow progress. But if America stands with these types of partners who are willing to make the right decisions, fight corruption, and work to do something for their citizens, we can build a different kind of future than what I saw in this refugee camp. This is a photo of Rangoon at night, and it's precisely this journey from dependence to dignity that I thought about on a recent visit to Burma. At the doorstep of China, we're seeing a democracy start to carefully and slowly take hold. We're seeing a market economy begin to expand and be more inclusive of all partners. As President Obama has made clear, we've learned a few things about how to do this work. We're going to work with and invest in the people of Burma in a conditional way as that government continues down the path of reform, as they make their books transparent, as they fight crony capitalism and corruption in an effective way. We will invest more in their people's opportunities for agriculture, for health, for road infrastructure, for energy in rural communities, and for economic opportunities in areas that otherwise are not receiving such. Burma is today the poorest country in that region by a long shot. But one of the things we did in this new way of working was USAID pulled together executives from Cisco, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, Google, and Microsoft, and what their own government, including Aung San Suu Kyi, referred to in a conversation with me as the tech dream team from America. We went together and said, okay, what do people really aspire for? What do they want to see? And it turns out that those companies can now partner with and invest in universities and technology parks that are starting to flourish in that country. And I had a chance on the visit to meet with about 200 computer science students who drove in from all over to sort of meet the company leaders and to learn about these new efforts. And it really is a fundamentally new and different approach to development. It's one, if the old model of development was American institutions like USAID hiring contractors to build roads, the new model is partnering with the engines of American innovation, Arkansas businesses, Clinton School graduates, the Little Rock foundations, to help nations build innovation economies and democratic societies that are more connected and intertwined with our own. And I fundamentally believe, whether we're working in places where the conditions are more ripe, like a Tanzania or a country like that has had rapid growth and increasing transparency and good governance, or places that are fragile, that are kind of aspiring to that future, like Somalia or Burma, that this new model can engage American institutions, leaders, and most critically, young people in really transforming the world around us and in leading the fight to end extreme poverty. Now, to achieve this goal, we've had to do things differently. And this is a photo you may recognize. Some of the folks in this photo are a good senator from Arkansas there on my left, and Senator Inhofe as well. But this was a trip we all made together to a project called Project Mercy in Ethiopia. And Project Mercy is a special place because Marta and Deme, who are in the middle there, are the founders of it. And Marta was the first woman senator in Ethiopia, fled during a revolution there, came back created this organization. And it is basically an effort that is very, very true to the local reality of where we were. They have 15 or 1,600 kids in school learning every day. We got a chance to meet them. For parents who send the kids to school, they either pay for it or they provide some service to the project, either working on making glassware that can be sold for export, or working to support the model farm that produces high nutritious foods for the community. Hundreds and perhaps thousands of families have been able to move out of poverty because of this effort. And for a long time, the United States, believe it or not, was actually not able to support organizations like Project Mercy. We were told that, well, they're an African organization, and so they may not, we may not be able to track the money, or we won't know exactly what's happening. Well, it turns out today we have been able to provide, since this visit, significant support to Project Mercy. And we're able to do that because we've changed the way we've worked. We want to find local solutions and local entrepreneurs and local leaders who can be the most efficient at delivering results for the least cost with the investment of American taxpayer resources. To get there, we've had to make tough choices. We've cut programs, 180 programs around the world. That's 22% of our total program portfolio since I started. We've shut down missions in 14 countries in order to concentrate people and resources in places where there is the majority of extreme poverty in the world and where we can work to end that kind of extreme poverty. We've introduced a new approach to evaluation where every project at large scale that we invest in will be evaluated by a third party based on strict criteria that the American Evaluation Association has called a model for the federal government, and the results will be put on online. In fact, if you have an iPhone, you can download an application. Just Google or look up USAID in the App Store, and we only have a few apps. But please download them. I think I'm one of the common customers of this evaluation app. I got to tell you, it's very cool. The Clinton students will understand this. It's really fun to read these really well-done evaluations that tell you both what's working and what's not working. And we found that 50% of our projects and programs have been adapted based on that kind of structured learning. And today there are about 130 or 140 evaluations that are public on there. Not all of them, document success. A lot of them talk about failure. But if you're not willing to learn what's working and what's not working, you can't manage to those kinds of results and those types of successes. And in practice, we've moved more than $1 billion from the traditional model of development to these smaller scale local solutions that we can prove generate better results for the investment of American taxpayer resources. Now that's a big part of succeeding as we go forward. But there's a larger trend at work, and that trend is that over the last few decades, international development assistance in its traditional form, which used to be far larger than foreign direct investment in these countries, is now considerably smaller, 1/10 to 1/14 the level of foreign direct investment in seemingly very poor countries. Why is that the case? It's because we've seen a huge emergence of new economies like India and Brazil that are actively investing in Africa and their neighbors. And it's because 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in sub-Saharan Africa, and each of them have levels of extreme poverty that are higher than 20%. In fact, in most cases, higher than 30 or 40%. And so we know that there's an opportunity right now to partner with and bring great American businesses and great investors to the task of ending extreme poverty with us. This is a photo of a group in Central America, and through a partnership with Walmart in Honduras and Guatemala, we're helping thousands of families to sell boxed vegetables into Walmart's local and regional supply chain. In Guatemala, the partnership has helped 600 smallholder farmers and their families have direct access to those supply chains. And what that means is, as I visited the program in Guatemala, I haven't been to Honduras, when you go to this village, it's been transformed. It's a place where 60% of the children used to be stunted because they didn't get adequate nutrition. And 10 years ago, nobody even asked for things like schools or other things for the children to actually learn and improve their lot in life. Today, as a result of the Walmart partnership, every dollar of taxpayer dollar that we invest is Walmart puts in $2, and not a philanthropic resource of actually purchasing output from that community. They've helped the farmers with our support improve their production of potatoes and onions and vegetables. They get a much higher farm gate price for these improved products that are going into a systematic supply chain. And when I visited, I said, well, what do you all need now? How can we be most helpful? Thinking the answer would be, you know, we'd like this great new seed variety and agricultural technology, or we'd like farm tools or something related to agriculture. Across the board, they wanted schools, because now their children didn't have to work on the farm. And what's the first thing we all aspire for the minute we have the opportunity to invest in our children is for them to be able to grow and expand their own horizons beyond what these families had been able to do. And it was just a very, very powerful example. Last year, as a result of our efforts to expand these types of partnerships, we've leveraged more than $3.5 billion of investment in agriculture from private companies, which is a larger amount than what USAID now invests in that space. And it just goes to show you the potential of partnership as we go forward. This is one example of how we do it. We have a program called the Development Credit Authority that starts from the very fundamental premise that many of these countries have their own sources of local wealth to drive their own development. And if we can be smart and leveraged in unlocking that local wealth, we can help accelerate the end of extreme poverty without making huge direct investments ourselves. By working with local banks in particular and offering credit guarantees for them to lend money to small-scale business operations, entrepreneurs, and other types of food and agriculture enterprises, we've been able to mobilize a record $700 million in local commercial capital lent to those small-scale job-creating businesses in rural communities around sub-Saharan Africa. This capital will empower more than 1 million entrepreneurs in 140,000 businesses around the world, from a print shop in Dar es Salaam to a mango farm in Haiti that, by the way, now partners with Coca-Cola to produce the Haiti Hope juice that is on the shelves here and is a USAID product I'm very proud of. So if you get a chance, buy and consume Haiti Hope. We also deployed the agency's first ever cadre of field investment officers. And this was an interesting evolution for us, you know, because the traditional foreign service didn't have people that necessarily start from the presumption of having private sector backgrounds and desire to work with banks and investors. But our field investment officers have helped us get this kind of a glide path on leveraging local resources. And I'll conclude with this concept. This is a map of a new network we've created called the Higher Education Solutions Network. And we really fundamentally believe if we're going to end extreme poverty, if we're going to tackle preventable child death, if we're going to end hunger, it's going to be done by young people who have a passion and commitment that we've seen here at the Clinton School. So we're now trying to build a global network of higher education institutions, of students and faculty and scientists and researchers who want to create the types of innovations that will lead to the breakthroughs that will change what's possible. Senator Bozeman's been a longtime leader in malaria. One of our partner institutes at Berkeley has a group of medical students and engineers that came together and created something they call a cell scope. It's basically an iPhone attached to a microscope, and it can take a photograph of a slide sample of blood, and without any sending of a sample to a laboratory, it can run an internal software algorithm and diagnose malaria based on that field-based technology. Taking laboratory diagnostics out of the challenge of treating and saving children's lives could allow us to make some huge gains in that effort. And those are just one example of, I think, the thousands of breakthroughs that we're just at the cusp of that can really change what's possible in our world. And so it's with that inspiration and with that aspiration and belief that President Obama this year, during his State of the Union address, issued a challenge and a call to all of us. He said we can work to end extreme poverty within a generation. Just last week, actually earlier this week, the president of the World Bank, Jim Kim, said the same thing, that we can get from 21% or 1.3 billion people of the global population, 21% of the global population, living on $1.25 a day, we can get that down to 3% by 2030 if we do the types of things we're talking about here. And at a time when budgets are tough in Washington, you've all noticed that, and at a time when people believe it's hard to work across the aisle and bring Democrats and Republicans together around a common vision, I'm hopeful, and Senator Boozman's been my guiding star on this, I'm hopeful that there is leadership and aspiration that America can do big things, that we know when we travel around the world, from that refugee camp on the Somali border to Rangoon a few weeks ago, to Tanzania or Ethiopia, where some of these companies are making these new investments, to parts of Latin America where we're unlocking a lot of this local wealth to fuel development. We know that we can succeed, and we know that people look to America for this kind of leadership, even when times are tough. In fact, in particular, when times are tough. And so I'm thrilled to be with you here. I just ask that you join the fight. I ask that you be hopeful that it is an achievable goal. And I ask that you talk to your kids or your students or your neighbors about the fact that hopefully in just 17, 18 years, we can wipe out something that's been with us since the beginning of time, which is large-scale, extreme human deprivation. It doesn't have to be that way. It's finally become profitable to end the task, and let's do that together. So thank you. Thank you for the chance to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. Got some time for some questions. Senator Boozman, you may have to get in this question and answer session as well. So we got a question. Yes, sir, right here. Wait for the microphone, please.
Thank you. That really was very inspiring, to say the least. You mentioned that in this partnership with private industry, which is fantastic. You know, of course, their motivation, as you mentioned, is not purely philanthropic. Do you encounter any tension or conflict? Because, of course, their motivation is understandably for their company. And do you have a systematic way to kind of look for that?
Well, thank you for your question. We encounter tension kind of with everything we do. So I kind of got comfortable with that a couple of years ago. But the reality is this is a field where there's been a long history of corporate bad behavior in these programs. You know, Nestle is famous for some of the things they did on infant formula years and years and years ago that were quite counterproductive towards saving children's lives. And so there's been a deep skepticism that's built up over time. Today, Nestle is a great partner in building cocoa and coffee and other types of supply chains that use their sourcing footprint to end extreme poverty in parts of West Africa. So I just think there's been an evolution over decades as we've globalized and as companies and partners recognize that you can have these win-wins. And I've visited companies where you know, their employees have had a chance to partner with, we were talking about General Mills earlier, their employees have had a chance to partner with small-scale food packaging companies in Malawi. And I went to an event they did at General Mills. You know, this relatively junior food packaging engineer who had been part of the project was sort of camped out in front of a poster describing his project and had a line of senior executives waiting to see him. I mean, that's the change in what's happening out there. And I think great companies recognize that and want to be a part of it for all kinds of reasons. And we want to welcome that engagement and be a platform that supports it.
Ambassador Easton's got a question right over here. No, right there. No.
Dr. Shah, I was interested in your last statement. I believe you used the word with respect to extreme poverty, the word elimination. Thank you for not saying reduction. I always thought that reduction was an understated goal. I have a specific question. I've spent a fair number of years in sub-Saharan Africa, and in recent years, there's been this trend toward increasing Chinese involvement. You mentioned the countries with high growth rates, which I suspect is largely commodity fueled, coexisting in the same place with high rates of extreme poverty. I wondered if you'd had any luck in persuading the Chinese government to use that money that they are pumping into every country in sub-Saharan Africa, without exception, to further this goal of elimination of poverty rather than financing infrastructure and commodity extraction projects.
Well, thank you. Look, I'd say three quick things. One is infrastructure and getting value from natural resources is a part of generating the economic growth that can sustain large-scale poverty reduction. So I want to just be clear about our view that that is a critical part of the task. Second, I'd say the Chinese model of how it's been done, and others have done more careful evaluations of this, with these long-term resource commitments tied to short-term infrastructure investments, usually built out by a large influx of Chinese labor into those countries, has not necessarily been a model that we have seen host countries seek. I mean, this is my experience at S. Senator Bozeman. As we travel, people want to work with America. They recognize that there's 6 million people on AIDS treatment because of America. They recognize there are 250,000 kids who don't die every year in sub-Saharan Africa because of America. They recognize that when we build a road in South Sudan, we're doing that in a way that also builds out a local construction industry, and that is the path to sustainability. So, I don't subscribe to the theory that everyone is enthralled with this alternative model. But I do think we can't walk away, and for those who suggest, America should wash its hand of this kind of work, that might be an easy political statement to make, but it's not in our long-term or even short-term strategic, national security, or economic interest, because these will be the emerging economies of the future. So would you add anything to that? But I think I was amazed, and I continue to be amazed. People want to engage and partner with America across the board. I know you've experienced that personally.
Thank you so much. My name is Shamim. I'm from Kenya. I am a Clean School alum, and I'm a staffer at Heifer International. And so I had a question, and I was interested in the initiative with the higher education, but more so I know that you have, or I guess USAID has, or foreign service has a mentorship program. And I'm very passionate about young people and the lack of young people in agriculture in that sector. Most of the farmers are aging and older, and that's where the investment is. And so when you are working with governments and all these other partners, how do you intend to maybe spread out your thinking in the mentorship so that if you are working with Nestle in Nairobi or a partner in Nairobi or the government in Nairobi or Kenya or anywhere in the world, that the officials and the stakeholders that USAID is partnering with are also pulling in their juniors, not so maybe just to make the decision, but to sit in the room and learn from the leaders, because I think there's a huge gap in what the young generation is exposed to, and most of the people at the table who are making good decisions about development don't include that young generation.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you raised that, because I agree completely. And that's why we created the Higher Education Solutions Network. There were folks wearing One Campaign t-shirts earlier today when we were meeting with the students. Campus after campus here in the United States or around the world, there is a yearning for, amongst young people, and frankly all people, to have a sense of meaning in their work and in their lives. And the fact that I think you can find great opportunities to start small businesses or create economically productive partnerships that also can do something as profound as ending extreme poverty is that sweet spot that so many young people aspire to. And it's why when we go abroad, we meet with young African entrepreneurs. Our USAID contracts with a company called USAID, which is Is she really? Great. Well, congratulations. But I was so proud of that when I found, when we were mapping in Haiti, in the Haiti earthquake response, we were mapping, well, where do we need to put food and water, and how are we going to find out where people are, and this and that. And the way we did it was an SMS text-based system run by USAID, an African company started by your sister. So, you know, that's the future.
That's a small world.
And it's also why we have to be honest with ourselves about the need to change. You know, change is tough, and Senator Boozman's been a great supporter of this, but not everyone uniformly believes that that it is safe to invest in a small-scale African business or a local partner like Project Mercy. And it's why I've been very grateful for the strong bipartisan support for this kind of reform effort.
Let's see, Jacob, right back here. Yeah.
Thank you for coming to speak to us, first of all. And my name is Jacob Perry. I'm from Fayetteville. I'm a student here at the Clinton School. And my question is, a lot of the World Development Goals have been criticized lately because they don't address the disparity, the development goals concerning poverty, right? So I'm wondering, is some of USAID's work, as it's making the shift from the traditional model to the newer model, working with smaller organizations, is it also taking that into consideration? Is it addressing disparity as well in some of its work? And if so, how?
Yes, so you mean inequality when you say disparity? Economic inequality or economic disparity. This is a common debate right now because the global community is trying to identify a new set of long-term goals for what we want to achieve with our development investment. And there's a debate about, is ending extreme poverty enough? Like, should we also be working to make sure that we narrow the gap between rich and poor in a lot of countries around the world? I'll just say, I don't know where this debate will end up. I'm a huge believer in just focus, focus, focus. And I think it is such a profound accomplishment for the world together to end $1 a day or $1.25 a day extreme poverty, that if we focus on that, and if all the international institutions that work on that stay focused, if the companies get engaged, and the student groups get engaged, and universities get engaged, and the faith community gets engaged, it's hard for me to imagine that how we wouldn't, in the process of achieving that objective, also give people, you know, a chance to be on a ladder of opportunity and to have that kind of growth in their own, you know, personal outcomes. So this is a little bit counterintuitive, I guess, but I'm a big believer in let's just pick the goal, end extreme poverty, let's get it done by 2030. It's actually doable. We could go through all the modeling in great detail. It takes motivating a huge amount of private investment, partnering with that private investment to drive the benefits to the poorest 40% of these populations, focusing on agriculture, energy, and small business starts, and ending preventable child death in the process. That's an achievable goal, and I think if the whole world focuses on it, it'll be one of the greatest accomplishments we've ever had, ever, and a great platform for achieving other things in the future.
Kathleen, you'll remember her, Dr. Shah. She's the one that had 6 questions in the student session.
Yes.
And I told her that I would call on her tonight because she...
I only got 1, so here's the 5 others wrapped into 1. Again, I'm Kathleen Brophy. I'm a first-year student. Thank you so much for coming. My question is kind of about this dependency model and this move towards local. So as a student of development, I come across this catch-22 in terms of this strategy. So in an attempt to sidestep corrupt governments that continuously prove unreliable, so you fund in these local projects, but in that way you sometimes create parallel government structures where the government then becomes less accountable and less responsible, and you have NGOs and nonprofits responsible for all of the service delivery for everyone in the country, and the government then is irrelevant and dysfunctional. So how do you make this balance between local and government stimulation and engagement in a way that you can bridge that problem and make a balance? And how can you engage governments productively in that way to make them productive factors in that problem?
Well, you're speaking to one of the big challenges, and when we talk about moving from dependency to self-sufficiency, it's just a recognition that if we keep doing what we've been doing, we can provide services and we can create some benefits for populations, but we can't fundamentally create the conditions that allow for our exit. And that's the definition of success. And so, so we're pushing ourselves to come up with ways to work with a broad range of local partners, local civil society leaders like those that are leading Project Mercy, local businesses like your sister, and so many other entrepreneurs like her, and local governments. And even in tough environments, we can create ways of working with local governments where we track the resources, we see what's happening, we fight corruption, and we deliver real results. And I would just say the experience of the last 3 years of leading this reform effort has only intensified my belief that that's possible. We've done 70 careful assessments of local governments. Many of them have shown, hey, you can't really put a lot of direct investment into this local government right now because they don't have transparency around this part of their books or this and that. But there are leaders there that want to have that conversation, that want to say, tell us what you need in order to be able to work directly with us, because we have a sense of pride and dignity and we want to be successful. And where we get that response, we can then work with them to put in place the conditions that allow us to work directly with them. So we're being responsible about it, but you've articulated why it's so important that we continue to focus on creating the conditions where we don't need to continue our aid and assistance for decades to come.
Mayor, do you have a question here? Mayor Hayes.
Quickly, and again, thank you, Skip. I'm Pat Hayes and had the chance to serve as mayor of the town across the river for 24 years. So we continue to take advantage of the South Side and the opportunity to come over and enjoy the talent that is here at the Clinton School, both locally as well as that comes in. So welcome. I had a chance to be active somewhat in international activities as it surrounds urban development. Was at the World Urban Forum in Naples, and then the Rio Plus 20 was a part of our delegation, U.S. delegation. We're a little bit over 7 billion people. 80% of those 7 billion people live within close to coastal areas. Climate change is a big challenge and affects most of those folks that will be impoverished because of living conditions, the kind of urban development that they've gone on. How active, you dealt with or talked about how you've been dealing obviously with hunger, shelter, economic development obviously is the biggest sustaining aspect of pulling people out of poverty. Education was one key that you just mentioned as to what people in, I believe, Uganda really wanted to see their children have. How active is USAID in, we'll say, urban development and trying to give guidance to that in light of potential climate change and how that might affect that development?
Thank you. We lead, on behalf of the government, the international humanitarian response in addition to these core development investments that we talked about. And as part of that, we pursue a lot of activity we call disaster risk reduction. And almost all of that is preparing for the types of consequences of the forces you're talking about. We know between now and the end of the century, the estimate is about a 4°C increase in temperature. I think that's a 1.5 meter increase in sea level. That in and of itself would reduce global crop output by about 30% if technology doesn't kind of keep up with resolving it. In addition to putting, as you point out, millions of people in coastal communities at real risk. So we tend to work on adaptation in those types of areas. We have a partnership with NASA where we get satellite data and help other countries plan for and protect themselves from the risk of those natural disasters. We have a large-scale program to invest in agricultural research, again with great American partners. I know that the university here has been a great research partner in agriculture and in climate-smart agriculture, which is, American technology companies like Monsanto and others really lead the global community in having genetics that could help improve performance in drought years in East Africa. So we're working on a project we call Water Efficient Maize for Africa. So I'm optimistic that we can be results-oriented and focused as we make these types of investments to tackle the challenges you're talking about, but all with a direct consequence of working to end extreme poverty. That's our objective, and that's the filter we continue to use when we select what to fund and what not to.
I know this conversation could go on and on and on, and I encourage you to come say hello to Dr. Shah. Before we thank him for being here, I've introduced Fernando, and now that Shamim's sister is running USAID. And let me also introduce another alum who is here, who's working for the Attorney General. This is Mark Lenhart, a Clinton School alum over here. And I think we're proud of the alumni and the stuff that they're doing, Dr. Shah. Let's hear it for Dr. Raj Shah, ladies and gentlemen.